Hello, everyone. My name is Molly Halsey, and I'm the event specialist here at EDB. And I will be your host today for our webinar, New Enhancement for Security and Usability in EDB 13. I'm joined by Mark Linster, our Chief Technology Officer, and Sebastian Manum, Principal Product Manager. Now, before we get started, I just want to go through a few housekeeping items. This presentation is being recorded. We will be sharing the recording along with the slides after the broadcast. Can we hit the next slide, please? The lines are currently muted. If you have a question, please feel free to submit it in the question panel. Today's session is scheduled for 1 hour. We expect the presentation to last most of our time today, and we will allot any extra time for Q&A. If we do not have time to address all questions, we will follow up afterwards with any attendee whose question was not answered. Now, without further ado, I give it over to Mark.
All right, thank you, Molly. So today, as Molly said, my colleague Sebastian Manum and we will present, what's new in EDB Postgres and the tools. We'll walk through, what are the highlights, and then we'll give you some of the deeper dive in databases and tools. But again, we'd encourage you to also read the release notes because, in an hour, we can't cover everything. And there may be very important things that are hidden deep in the details and not visible that in our webinar here. Okay, so I'll spend a brief amount of time, promise not a whole lot, on who is EDB, but it's important that you all understand who we are and why we're making these statements and who you're working with. And again, at the same time, remember to put your questions into the Q&A so that we can address them afterwards. So EDB has acquired Second Quadrant in September, so that's 2 months ago. Before that, I could say that we were already the largest Postgres company in the world, and now we are truly the largest Postgres company in the world. We have more expertise and more contributors to Postgres, I think, than any other company, and we're a key driver for the innovation in Postgres. So when we're talking about expertise here, you may not know the whole historical context, but EDB and Second Quadrant have been working on Postgres for many, many years. EDB since 2004, Second Quadrant since 2007. We've contributed a lot to the open source side of Postgres. So things like materialized views or heap-only tuples or serializable parallel queries or even parallel queries. And really important from the Second Quadrant side, hot standby and logical replication. That's really something that the Second Quadrant team has driven. So our joint teams have been heavily invested in providing open source capabilities for Postgres. At the same time, we've been working a lot with very large customers to drive Postgres towards the type of enterprise solution that our customers want. And that's documented in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, where we've been in for 7 years since the Gartner Magic Quadrant they started republishing it in, I think, 2013. And it shows clearly that they, based on the interviews with large customers, are convinced that we have the completeness of vision and the ability to execute that is important. Now, I'll point out one more important thing on this slide, and that is what is not on this slide. What is not on this slide is any other open source relational database. They're all gone in the Magic Quadrant. If you look back in the history, there were other ones in there. Today, EDB Postgres is the only one that's left, and that's a clear endorsement from Gartner's side of Postgres, of EDB, and of open source. So going forward here today, as I said, we have more Postgres experts on board than I think any other company. Over 300 technologists, 26 Postgres community contributors and committers. And for anybody who's active in Postgres, these faces and names should really, truly ring a bell. Mike Stonebreaker, the father of Postgres, who's invented the concept over 25 years ago, the concept of a object relational database over 25 years ago when he was at Berkeley. He is an advisor to EDB today. And then Bruce Momjen, co-founder of the Postgres community, has been with EDB for a long time, drives this forward. Peter and Robert as architects and leaders of the development focused on Postgres, both the open source and the closed source version. And then Simon Riggs, the former CEO of Second Quadrant, now has joined us as a Postgres fellow. So it's important for everybody to understand we have real depth in Postgres and a great bench globally to work with our customers.
Alrighty, so I think before we jump in today, we have a quick poll that we wanted to get out. So I'm launching it now. The poll today is, which version of Postgres are you using today? You have multiple choice options if you're using more than one. The options are EDB Postgres Advanced Server 12, PostgreSQL 12, EDB Postgres Advanced Server 11, PostgreSQL 11, EDB Postgres Advanced Server 10, PostgreSQL 10, EDB Postgres Advanced Server 9.6, PostgreSQL 9.6, or EDB Postgres Advanced Server 9.5, or PostgreSQL 9.5. We've already had 50% of the audience answer. We'll give it just another 2 seconds for anyone else who wants to get in a quick answer. And here are the results.
All right, that is amazing. I mean, let me say it's great to see that by far the majority of the audience is on recent releases of Postgres. That's always important for us, right? Because we want people to take advantage of the performance enhancements, the security enhancements, and the new features. So the fact that I'm seeing a total of like 50% that are using Postgres, the Postgres 12 version, and only a very small set still on the older versions. So 9.5, you really have to get off because end of life is looming. And 9.6, I mean, it's a good version, but I would really suggest consider moving on because the performance enhancements, again, have been very significant. So it's going to be worth it. Sebastian, you as a product manager, you want to chime in on this?
No, I think it's very good to see that we have so little presence on 9.5. And as you mentioned, the end of life of 9.5 is nearing. So you really need to move. But there's little presence on 9.5 and on 9.6, actually. So I think that is very good. Even on 10, there's little presence. So I think we have a group of people that are really looking at the newer versions of Postgres and EDB Postgres Advanced Server, and that is very good. What I'm excited about is to hear about people that are also running PostgreSQL 13 already, which is an option, of course. But let's chime in on that later.
We should have put that into the poll. That is absolutely correct oversight on our side. Okay. Let's move forward. Okay, so let's go back to the agenda. First, I'll just spend a few minutes on why the tools. I mean, what are they, and why should you consider them? And this is really, again, not to toot our marketing horn, but it's really to give everybody pause for thought who's not using any tools, whether they're ours or some other open source tools. There are really good reasons to put these tools around Postgres because you'll get a lot more mileage out of them. So the first thing is, I mean, we from EDB obviously pride ourselves to have a complete portfolio of databases, tools, supports, and services. And I'm not going to go through everything here, but many of our customers work with PostgreSQL, so the open source version of Postgres, which is really, really good. And then I would say about 2/3 of our customers use EDB Postgres Advanced Server. The reason they do that, and I'll get into that in a little bit more detail, is the native Oracle compatibility, improved security mechanisms such as auditing and data redaction, or password profiles, and a few other enterprise capabilities that really make Postgres more usable in the enterprise, things that an Oracle DBA may expect to have, like a resource governor, that are not available in standard Postgres, but the DBA will look for them. So those are things that we've added to Postgres Advanced Server. And then
is another interesting one. SQL Protect is another one to add.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And Sebastian, maybe just spend a minute on what is SQL Protect.
So SQL Protect is an option where basically your database can be put into a learning mode. Will learn the characteristics of the application, what kind of queries are run, during which queries, what columns are addressed, and all of that stuff. And after that, you can put it into a mode where it is restrictive. So that means that if you should have an application that wants to run a query that is not known to Postgres, it will chime in on that. Now you can leave it into the permissive mode where it will log and it will bring it to your attention. But we have some high security customers that basically say, like, we have learning options. We can teach Postgres all of the stuff that the application would run. So we will use that as a template, and after that we can put it into the restrictive mode, and as such basically prevent anybody else from gathering data that the application would never gather. I think it's a very powerful option
So
if you're
like,
in high restricted permission options.
So it's like a smart SQL firewall that learns what's allowed and what's not allowed, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's really interesting. Okay, and then as far as the tools go, and I'll dive into that a little bit more. And again, you don't have to use these tools, but you should use this or something comparable because you'll get more mileage out of Postgres. One is an enterprise level manager to manage hundreds of Postgres databases. Because again, when your estate grows, you can no longer do it on the command line. You need something that does exception-based management. Backup and recovery. Well, this is not just about recovering from disaster. This is about managing policies, making sure that your backup collection aligns with corporate policy, that you can go back to last week, last month, etc. Failover Manager. You want to be able to do a failover in a predictable manner. I mean, Postgres is really stable. Don't get me wrong, but when it happens, you want to make sure that you know that within less than a minute, you're up and running again. And even if that happens in the middle of the night. So that's really what Failover Manager does. Connectors, so you can connect to the database from your applications, and then migration tools so that you can get there, right, from Oracle, etc. So I'll dive into that into a wee bit more here. So let me start with, we talked about EDB Postgres Advanced Server. And for many of you, you saw in the survey that, you know, a lot of people are using Postgres Advanced Server. For those that don't know it, what it is it's standard Postgres, but we've added Oracle compatibility, productivity tools, developer features, security features like SQL Protect that Sebastian just described. And we've added those on top of Postgres without taking anything away from Postgres. And we do that because enterprise customers come to us and say, hey, I need this, you know, I'm getting off Oracle. I need something like DBMS AQ. Do you have that? I need something like password profiles. I need something like DBMS Redact, right? So we've added those capabilities to improve the productivity of developers, DBAs, but also make migrations a lot easier. So Enterprise Manager. Well, for those of you that are coming from SQL Server or even more from Oracle, this will look quite familiar. Postgres Enterprise Manager is designed to make the migration easier, migration from other commercial systems where typically you do have tools for large-scale monitoring and alerting that are highly graphical and make it much easier to understand what is happening in my database and in my collection of databases. Because when we talk to customers today, it's no longer about, oh, I have one or two Postgres databases. The question is, I have hundreds. I mean, it's actually bigger than that now. I have thousands of databases. What are you going to do for me? And try to monitor thousands at the command line or with scripts. That's a losing proposition. That's why Oracle introduced Oracle Enterprise Manager. That's why we put in place Postgres Enterprise Manager. Similarly for failover, right? If you have one or two databases and it's not terribly mission critical, you can keep an eye on it. You'll get an email saying, hey, the server's in trouble. Go flip the switch, promote the replica, right? Reconnect everything. But if you have hundreds of applications and if your service level is like in the 4 nines, there's no way you can do that anymore. So that's why we built EFM. Runs on top of streaming replication, so it's comparable to second quadrant's rep manager, for example, and makes sure that the primary database gets monitored and failover happens automatically, reestablishment of the connections happens automatically, etc. Backup and recovery, same thing, right? I mean, people may say, hey, doing a backup, what's hard about that? Well, what's hard is managing the policy, making sure you have all the backups in the right place, make sure you have all the WAL files and the backups in the right place, so you can do a point-in-time recovery, and you can do a point-in-time recovery for an agreed-upon period, etc. So having a real good backup and recovery tool is important, because that's how you know what you can go back to.
Yeah. So as an example, Postgres has options to keep archives from all of the WAL files, and it has options to create backups. But as Mark mentioned already, WAL files are important to recover a certain backup. So you cannot just clean out all of those WAL archives and just expect the backup to be recoverable by itself. And what the backup and recovery tool has for an option is, if you delete a backup, then all of the WAL files that are no longer necessary can also be cleaned out. So we actually keep in sync that the WAL files that are needed for a recovery are always available. And I think that's a very strong thing to have in the tool. It's very complex to build it yourself with own tooling, and that is basically where backup and recovery tools really excel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. The migration portal, another tool to migrate from Oracle to Postgres. It's something that we also provide to make the transformation and the testing and the transformation and automatic application of Oracle DDLs onto Postgres Advanced Server much easier. It's something that we do at large scale. I think we even introduced this in July 2018, and the product manager for Migration Portal has told me that by now we have tested 11.3 million DDL objects. So create table, create store procedure, create trigger, etc. for compatibility. And today we are at 92% compatibility to EDB Postgres Advanced Server. So those are the tools that are required around Postgres, right? So you may think, well, but Postgres is a great database. Why do I need so many tools around it? Well, hopefully this gave you an understanding that the best database without high availability, well, it only goes so far. You will not be able to go above 99.5% SLA if you don't have high availability tools. You just can't, because you will not be fast enough, okay? No matter how little you sleep, you will need a tool to do that. If you get more than 5 or 10 or 20 databases, you will need exception-based management. There is no other way to do it, because you're just going to go crazy, because all you're going to do is stare at the screen and see if you can see a failure happening, right? Databases without integration tools. If you can't move data back and forth, if you can't replicate from or to Oracle, if you can't get at data that is stored somewhere else, it's just a data silo. It's a toy, right? It's not the real thing. And then if you can't migrate to it, well, okay, you can use it for new projects, which is already really good. But most companies have large estates that they want, where they want to free up the cash flow and get onto something more innovative and easier to use. So migration tools are really important. Okay, so EDB 13. The key takeaways are really the focus on usability, security, and compatibility. Doesn't mean that there's not also other really good stuff in there. And Sebastian will dive a little deeper, but we just want to make sure that when you think about this, when you think about why should I make the effort, it's really improved a lot in terms of usability, security, and compatibility, most notably with Oracle. So at a high level, usability, what we've done is Postgres Enterprise Manager, they work with very large databases and large scale Postgres deployments. What have we done to make it work with very large databases? Well, It's relatively simple. We've added a search feature, so you can find a certain object, a certain query, a certain trigger much, much faster in databases. When we started with PEM, databases with a couple of hundred objects were considered large. By now, 10 to I think the largest one I've seen, 40,000 objects in one database are pretty standard. So now you need to find those things faster. We have made sure that the PEM GUI now integrates with BART, the backup and recovery tool, and EFM, so you can do all of that graphically. And then to round it out, PEM is now WCAG level 2 AA certified, which, to many of our US audience just means section 508. Okay, that basically means that for visually impaired coworkers, PEM is now fully usable with screen readers, etc. Again, that's one thing that our large customers are asking for. Key work on the security side, right? Postgres has introduced SCRAM authentication a while ago. Now we've added channel binding, so to make sure that there can't be a man-in-the-middle attack. Minimum TLS versions, they're now hard requirements to go with recent TLS versions, again, to enforce security postures. EDB loader and the foreign data wrappers are now supporting certificate-based authentication. Again, that just is a very much improved security posture. And then in compatibility, compound triggers, define column long. I mean, again, if you're just a native Postgres user, you may not know what that is, but if you come from Oracle and you want to have dynamically generated code, that's a very useful command. And then automatic partitioning for list and hash. And I think, Sebastian, you're going to go a little bit more into those capabilities, right?
Yes, totally.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so now I'm going to hand it over to Sebastian, who's the product manager for the database server, and he's going to walk you through more of the details.
So as Mark mentioned earlier, Advanced Server is built on top of PostgreSQL 13, which means that all of the additions to PostgreSQL 13 are also added to Advanced Server 13. And this is from the release notes from PostgreSQL 13, which basically, I think it plots it very well. Parallelizing vacuuming, incremental backups. And this is really where strong points are for the commits from PostgreSQL 13. I think we can take a deeper look. Can you? Yeah, there we go. So these are the contributions that Second Quadrant and EDB have added to PostgreSQL 13. And there's even some of those contributions that come both from Second Quadrant working together with EDB even before the merger already. So it's good that we have this collaboration within the community, and that's how it's meant to be. I just felt it's good to mention it. Some key things to note. If we talk about the administrative side, there is tools to verify Postgres system catalogs. There is a PG-cat check, which you can use to check certain parts of the catalog. And we now added a feature that you, for instance, can also check for all the relations if there is at least one file in the backend that represents that table. So there were situations where customers ran into issues that the actual table file was missing, and with this tool you can basically verify that and find all of those tables that you have issues with. It's presented on GitHub for Enterprise DB. It's publicly available to everybody. Use it and make use of it. Another contribution is on PG Verified Backup. So there's now a tool to verify a database backup, and it looks over the backup itself and if all of the WAL files are there and all that stuff. So I think it's a very interesting tool to look into, and it should be added as an extra check if you are creating your backups. Some of those backup tools already have checks like this, but if you don't have that or you want to build specific monitoring, I would say make use of that. If we look at the performance side of things, I think the most exciting one is that we can do pruning and direct joining of partition tables. That really is exciting to me because it really excels partition tables. We are working on a blog which is coming out soon about advanced server features that also relate to partition tables, and it's a really enhancement for Postgres. We've seen enhanced over the last few versions actually. Parallel vacuum of indexes is another interesting subject, but we will get into it just a little bit more in detail a little bit later. On the developer focus side of things, I think, and this is something, of course, from the second quadrant team, the ability to use logical replication for partition tables with before triggers. That really extends to, I think, power of Postgres on multiple levels. It links that together. And on the security side of things, if we talk about the last item on the list, erasing memory with sensitive information, I haven't really looked into the details behind it actually myself, but it really sounds to me like we added functionality to increase security by securely erasing memory before releasing it back to the OS. And that is one of the most common security issues of other systems. So I think it's very good to have this functionality and to leverage that. The other items are based on, are mostly on client certificates, where we added support, password support, and some of the things like foreign data wrappers can now connect through certificate-based authentication. So all in all, very powerful contributions. So if we talk about the vacuum improvements, we have parallel vacuum for append-only tables. And what you can see is that we can now parallelize vacuuming. And as you add parallel workers, vacuuming will go faster. So you see the round trip times decrease. We did some internal benchmarking on this, and it's looking very good. Mark, did you have anything you wanted to add here yourself?
No, it's just something that you know, makes the cleanup of an index, especially, you know, if you sort of got behind and ran into a problem, much faster, right? I mean, this is something that shouldn't happen, but every once in a while it does happen. And then knowing that you can just throw more workers at it and do it multiple times faster is a really interesting capability.
And is this tests that your department has been doing internally?
Correct. Yes. So there is there's a blog actually. I mean, the font is tiny, but as Molly said, we're going to share the presentation afterwards. There's a blog that goes in detail through what parallel vacuum actually does and you know how much faster it really is. So and it has all the commands in it too.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay.
Can you proceed to the next slide? So as I mentioned earlier already about PGCat check, it's a tool for diagnosing system catalog corruption. You can find it on GitHub. And there's an option to check if the initial file is available for every relation. Yeah, I would say check it out, use it, and it's very good to just know if there's any issues that you need to fix.
Yeah, because this was always a problem where, you know, if you come from Oracle, Oracle controls all the files down to the drive and actually manages the access to the drive. Postgres doesn't do that. It leaves that to the file system. And if, mostly it's because of operator error, somebody goes in and deletes one of the Postgres data files, Postgres does not detect that until it tries to access the data file. With this tool, you can find out, you know, if for every table, there's at least one relation file available, and you can find that out before you run into trouble.
Yep. So another contribution in Advanced Server is, and we call this DBA Productivity. It is about partitioning. We already know the options that we have for partitioning. There's range partitioning, list partitioning, and hash partitioning. Range partitioning was released last year already with automatic partitioning, which means that if you try to insert data in a range that doesn't exist, then automatically the partition is created for you and it will hold data. And we added that same option to list partitioning, and we also added options for hash partitioning. This is a big item in the blog that's coming out. I think it's a very exciting and interesting chapter. The most interesting and exciting part is that you can also combine this. So you could use, for instance, list partitioning with subpartitions for hash partitioning. And if you then have automated list partitioning, every new list partition will automatically be created with, let's just say, 3 hash partitions in the backend, which you might have created for performance. So that is a really powerful addition. What is interesting to know also is that the syntax that we use is compatible with the Oracle syntax. So if you're running into migrations where you have complex partitioning schemes, first of all, it's very easy to recreate them. It's very easy to maintain them, to have automatic management for maintenance. But next to that, it's also very good to know that you don't need to have huge migration efforts to rewrite the DDL that creates the partitioning schemes.
Yeah. And I think this whole automatic partitioning is very important for IoT applications, or anything that has timestamp data. That's where we see this quite a bit. Data feeds from satellites or from other devices, where you want to always kind of have current partitions, historical partitions, and now those things can be created automatically and without significant locking.
Exactly. Yep. So this is an example of list partitioning, the first item in the table. What you see is that we highlighted the keywords list, and we highlighted the keywords automatic, and we highlighted the value NLD. What you can see is we create a table, a partition table, and we create 2 partitions, one for IND and one for USA. And then some weird Dutch guy started inserting values for NLD, and there's no partition for it. With Advanced Server 12 and with PostgreSQL 13, basically you will get errors stating like the partition doesn't exist. But with EPAS 13, with the automatic keyword, you can insert these values and the partitions are automatically created for you with the subpartitions if needed. Another example is on the automatic partitioning, the hash partitioning, where you see that we highlighted the keywords partitions and then the 4, which basically informs EPAS to create 4 partitions for you. Now, of course, for 4 partitions, this isn't really that exciting. If you, for some reason, feel the need to create 100 partitions at once or 1,000, it works with that also. But I think more exciting actually is that it could be subpartitions for an automatically create list partition. And then it automatically creates 4 partitions because this part of the statement informed it that there should be 4 always. So those are the 2 examples that we have, and more info to come.
Yeah.
2 other options that enhancements that might be good to enhance DBA productivity is, first of all, EDB loader now supports to check on duplicate rows. So previously on duplicate rows, we would have an abort of the whole loading operation. And now those duplicate rows are recorded in a so-called BAT file, which is where all of those issues usually end up with. And the loading process continues. There's an option for that. So you can still use the old behavior if you would like to. Another option is that we have an option to now log the amount of entries, the amount of rows that are processed for a bulk process. And the number of rows processed appear in the audit and in the server log. This is also an option that you can enable or disable. For Oracle compatibility, we added some features, which one is about using index. You can create a custom index with the using index parameter option. And another feature, and this is really exciting to me, is there's a keyword called parallel or no parallel, which allows you to set parallel options for creation and maintenance of indexes. And one of the cool things about this option is that, first of all, it is recorded per index instead of per table, where PostgreSQL and EPAS-12 only do that per table. But it actually leverages all of the functionality to do all of those parallel optimizations of the index that is already built into the PostgreSQL core system. We added some enhancements to EDB's structured procedural language, which is also, as Mark mentioned, the defined column long, which allows you to return variables as a long instead of as an integer, and some other items that are added, like the last error position, which actually shows you the exact character where the error has occurred on certain pieces of the code, and compound triggers and EDB SPL structured procedure language forward declaration. So those are all enhancements to the structured procedural language, and I think it's good, first of all, that it adds for Oracle compatibility, but also this is something that developers could leverage themselves also. EDB structured procedural language is a very powerful language.
And it's basically, I mean, for those of you that are not familiar with it, it's EDB's version of PLSQL, right? So it's it's designed to be as close as possible to PLSQL, and that is what allows us to simplify the migration of packages, stored procedures, and other code elements from Oracle onto EDB Postgres Advanced Server.
But do you agree that next to using it for migrations, it's also awesome to...
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a reason why Oracle invented these things, right? They invented them to make developers and DBAs more productive. And the key thing here is, and Sebastian, you're absolutely right, for DBAs to know that in EDB Advanced Server, they have these capabilities and capabilities like DBMS AQ, right? That's a huge leg up for a developer, right? Because today in Postgres, if you want to do something that has transactional queuing, well, you actually can't do it. You have to go to RabbitMQ or something like that. But the consequence of that is you're now running your queuing mechanism in a different transaction context, right? So you can't do integrated rollback and all those things. Whereas if you do it inside the database, in DBMS AQ, then you have that all in one transaction context. That's why Oracle did it, and you're absolutely right. That's why, you know, developers have these capabilities in EDB Postgres Advanced Server.
Yep. So we also added some statistical functions and the to timestamp TZ function. Enhancements like this are ongoing. We constantly add new functionalities. The functions, what the function actually does already exists in Postgres. So this is actually the stats mode and the median as the function as it's currently available. So this is really an Oracle compatibility enhancement. What I find very exciting is that we have a package called UTL HTTP, which allows you to parse HTTP callouts. And that now also has an end of body exception, which sounds trivial to me, but I think in migrations, and if you really want to leverage this package, it's so much highly required to have functionalities like that. So on the security side of things, well, there's a lot of security announcements that I already mentioned that is part of PostgreSQL, which is also added to Advanced Server. We added AES 192 and AES 256 encryption algorithms to the DBMS package. And this final item, I think that is an exciting item, actually. It's a pretty new item. We have the option to audit usage, and you can audit on specific tasks, which could be DDL or DML or anything like that. And we added an extra mode to that, which is the set mode. If you enable that, then automatically all of the set commands that you run in your session are also audited. It's very important because it finalizes the trail. If you are running in a session, in a super user session, you have the option to change the EDB audit setting session-wide. And if you change that, then less auditing is spilled to the audit log. And with this option, you can still have a record that somebody changed it actually. And then you can at least see that it is changed and also verify why it was changed and stuff like that.
Yeah, this is a great addition. I mean, auditing is something that a lot of our financial services customers, banks, etc., come to us, and we've done significant enhancements in auditing. I think last year or the year before, we added something where if you do an alter user, right, and you change the password of the user, then the password doesn't get written to the log file, for example, anymore, right? So those are all things that are very important, and a lot of our customers come to us for exactly those capabilities. So here, closing the loop on auditing is a big deal.
Yep, and there's more stuff to come on auditing in future releases also. We have a lot of focus on.
Okay. All right. So I'll watch the clock. So I'll be a little brief here on the tools, what's new. It's a little easier to see because we can show pretty pictures. So I won't go into a whole lot of details here, but in Postgres Enterprise Manager, which builds on top of PG Admin, we've now included tools like a graphical plan analyzer, which makes understanding the explain statement much easier. You don't have to go to Depeche anymore. You can do it just locally within your tool. SNMP v3 support, something that a lot of our customers have asked for. Enhanced performance diagnostics, I'll show you what that looks like. And then the other options I already talked about. So the schema diff tool, I skipped over that in the prior list. The schema diff tool, a great tool if you want to promote changes from development into production via staging, for example. But here you can just point this tool at two schemas and it will automatically find for you the difference, right? But then it'll also generate a script to resolve the difference, right? So that's a really interesting tool now for anybody who's getting into DevOps and is thinking, okay, how can I find these things and get them correctly into Jenkins or other tools that I use to promote my changes. Improved performance diagnostics. This is like performance diagnostics. If you have not looked into PEM, this is the greatest thing, I think. It allows you to look back in time and say, what happened? What happened, like in this window here, what happened this morning at about 1959, so or yesterday evening around 8 o'clock, what happened, okay? And then I can see here exactly how busy was my CPU, how many lightweight locks that I had, how many IO bottlenecks did I have. I can drill into it, look at the queries, look at the sessions, find out, how many active sessions did I have, which session was waiting for what, why were things suddenly getting slow, right? If you come from Oracle, the equivalent that you have in mind is the $V view. Travel back in time and understand what happened. That's possible now. Okay, HA and backup and recovery. So again, we added stronger encryption, stronger authentication, encryption of the messaging between the failover agents. And then we also added some performance enhancements. So the Failover Manager now is even faster in detecting a failure and then in promoting a replica to become the new primary, right? And then for those that are in the US government space, BART, the backup and recovery tool, is now FIPS 140-2 compliant. So that's also a significant enhancement for our customers that have those security requirements. Okay, Migration Portal. Migration Portal is not really a tool that you get with EDB, with the EDB tools, right? You don't have to pay for it. It is just available for you at migration.enterprisedb.com. But again, well, not just every year, but every couple of weeks, we push out significant new enhancements to make the migration experience better and improve compatibility. And one of the things that we're doing with the migration portal is because it's a public service and because we literally get millions of objects that are being uploaded, we statistically analyze that the whole time. And that is a lot of input for Sebastian's team when they decide, okay, what are the Oracle migration features or Oracle compatibility features that we need to implement next, meaning which feature is happening how often, which package is being referred to how often, etc. We've also made significant usability improvements on the migration portal. So now even for schemas that have tens of thousands of objects in them, the analysis time now is literally just seconds. Okay, so that's definitely something worth looking at. Okay. Okay, so let's briefly talk about the platforms that we support. I want to make sure we have time to talk about the resources and have some time for questions at the end of the presentation. And again, I'd encourage all of you questions, please pop them into the Q&A so that we can work through those in the time that we have. So Sebastian, you want to talk about the platforms that we support?
Yeah, so these are the platforms that we currently support. I think the most important items are at the bottom is what we changed. So we discontinued Red Hat 6, which is end of life on November the 30th of 2020. And we have also discontinued Windows Server 2012. We still support Windows Server 2016 and 2019, and we will increase to do so. We recently added Debian 10 and Ubuntu 20 also. And for all of the Power customers, we also support Red Hat Linux 6 on Power PC, Little Endian version 9, 8 and 9.
Okay, all right. So we have about 10 minutes left for questions. But before we go into that, there's a couple of really important resources here. On our blog, we've summarized many of the things that we've now said about the EDB 13 release. As Sebastian said, there's a forthcoming blog that he's working on about the new DDL enhancements for Postgres and EDB Postgres 13. I think that's going to be a really interesting contribution. The downloads for everything that we talked about here and all the versions that Sebastian just mentioned are available on our download page. We've just published this morning new tuning guides for Linux and for Windows. So Postgres and Postgres Advanced Server on Linux and on Windows. And if you're using this, take a look at it because it's really, really worth it. We've just published a blog not too long ago. My colleague Vic Fearing published that, where he showed that untuned Postgres versus tuned Postgres in a specific workload. This was for HammerDB, so one of the benchmark tools, showed 8 times performance improvement. So taking a look at the tuning guide is really, really important because we don't want you to be frustrated if just a few clicks could put you into the right position. I know we talked a lot about security. We talked about security that's inside Postgres and then the new features. But I also want to point out to you that we do work, for example, with TELUS Vormetric, their CTE tool. And there's a blog also in our blog collection that describes how that works and how that can be used, because sometimes users think that the built-in Postgres capabilities may not be sufficient. So this is something also worth looking at. And then, tools for deployment automation. So let's go into questions now. Molly, what do you got?
Yes, so one of the first questions that came in was, how is Postgres 13 connectors enabled with Google Cloud Platform Certificate Authority, where encrypted data can be run in Python, Kotlin, or AWS web application? Very long-winded, I realize.
Yeah. So I think there's multiple questions hidden underneath that, right? Can we use Google Certificate Authority? I would assume so, yes. Or Sebastian, what do you think?
So what I know is that our connectors can use client authentication certificates. What I also expect is that we don't have any integration with automatically fetching client certificates or things like that from a certificate authority service. This might be interesting to look into what we can do on that end. The way that I picture it, maybe I'm picturing it totally wrong, by the way, but the way I picture it is that you have on the system, you have a user or a service account that is able to get client certificates from the certificate authority and then use that for authentication. It might be a very interesting way to connect on the cloud, but I don't think we have any integration with it yet.
You would need to use some automation like Ansible or something like that to get the certificates and deploy the certificates, right, Sebastian?
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Okay, great. Another question we had that came in right at the beginning was, with a subscription to EDB, can you get BDR from second quadrant?
So, okay, it's going to be part of a subscription, but as far as I understand it now, it's not part of the general subscription. But Sebastian, on the product management side, you probably have more insight there.
Yeah, that's the information I have right now also. So we are working on merging the second quadrant and the EDB companies. And that is also on the subscription side and also on the tools that we provide and all that stuff. And even on the people side, on the developer side also. So this is a huge undertaking, and we're doing good with it. On the subscription side, the way I understand it is that BDR is going to be an extra subscription that we provide, but I don't have any other details or can confirm that this is the actual direction. This is just my information.
Yeah, please ask if you're currently a second quadrant customer, please ask your account exec to keep you posted as to how this all unfolds. If you are a current second quadrant customer, nothing will change for you. Nobody's going to take anything away from you. So we're going to keep working all commitments, etc. that we had. But as Sebastian pointed out, we're working on finding the best match for all the capabilities and the subscriptions. But as you know, that takes a while.
All right, those were the two main questions that we had come into the chat. Was there anyone else in the audience who had a question that they want to put in? I'm going to open it up. I'm going to give everyone 10 seconds if they had any other questions they wanted to ask. I'm going to wait and see. All right, it doesn't look like any other questions are flowing in. Oh, wait. We did. Okay, someone did ask a question. They are now falling in. People are also wondering about Barman and the second quadrant tools. Do we have anything that we could share with them about that?
Yes, so this is one of the other things that we are currently merging, and that is on the tools that we have for the backup tools. We are currently looking into PG Backrest and Barman and BART, and we still need to find a roadmap and take decisions on that. More information to come really soon. I do think that Barman is going to be let me put it differently. Barman is going to be going to stay available to the second quadrant customers, but will also be available for the other EDB customers. But that's the only thing that I can give clarity on right now.
Yeah, but again, really important here to everybody. The merged or joined company will honor all commitments, right? So I know there's going to be changes. There's thoughts about how to merge subscriptions, etc. But we're going to honor all existing commitments.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much, Mark and Sebastian. That is all the questions that we have for today. Thank you for joining us for the webinar, everyone. We will be sharing this recording along with the slides with you as soon as possible. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.